Hello, everyone. My name's Sean MacLean. Hope you can hear me okay. Coming to you from the studios of Classical King FM. And this is Beethoven for a live Q&A with some pretty important musical people here in Seattle. This festival is pulling together 17 arts organizations of Seattle for the celebration of 250 years since this genius Ludwig van Beethoven was born. So tonight's program will be called Legacy, and I will be very pleased to welcome organizations and artists for tonight who are Byron Shankman, the artistic director of Byron Shankman and Friends. Hello, Byron.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. Allison Halstead-Reed, who's executive director of Vashon's Center for the Arts. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you.
And VYACHESLAV, or Slava as he's known, GRYAZNOV, the pianist and are the artist that Vashon Center for the Arts will be presenting. Welcome, Slava.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Aaron Der Hakopian, who is Director of Artistic Administration for Seattle Opera. Welcome, Aaron.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And finally, Sarah Larson, who's mezzo-soprano and the artist presented by Seattle Opera. Welcome,
Thank you
Sarah.
for having me. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think I'll start with Byron here. Byron, you've been many times guest on our live show here at King FM, and you're a great person for talking in depth about what Beethoven's legacy means today. There's this thing about Beethoven, which is that the life and the struggles that he led seem more and more relevant today than they ever have been. If you had to choose one particular mark that Beethoven left in the world of the arts today, could you choose one?
You know, I think what I would choose more than anything else really is the role of the composer in society, because Beethoven was really the first composer who saw himself and who other people saw as an artist and a genius and maybe even a prophet and someone creating universal works of beauty to last forever, which was a way that nobody thought of composers before that. And it has pluses and minuses, because I think on one hand, it meant that he was able to compose from the deepest core of his values and his vision of a world that would be more equal and just and loving of all humanity. And then on the other hand, it set him up to be co-opted by nationalist movements. And then what happened is that they on the one hand, held him up and held his music up as being great art that was above any kind of politics. And on the other hand, they used him and his music and what would become the canon of Western classical music as a way of creating and perpetuating white supremacy and patriarchy. So we've been left with this whole legacy of, on the one hand, this gorgeous music, and then on the other hand, this sort of complex history of how it's been used and how we use it.
So he elevated the status of being a composer as a profession, but he also then subjected future composers to the alliances that are thrown at composers.
Yes, absolutely. And I think also created a standard by which other composers would be judged. And then because he had this elevated status, what happens is if you find some bad voice leading in a late Beethoven sonata, which happens, you say, well, but he's a genius and it's okay, or there must have been a reason and we better study and figure out why this is. And then on the other hand, if you find that same kind of bad voice leading in a piece, say by a woman composer, you say, well, she's no Beethoven. And that's the problem with the kind of double-edged sword of the idea of the great composer and the canon.
Thank you, Byron. And I look forward to your virtual concert, which we've been talking about here on King FM coming up right after Christmas.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Allison Halstead-Reed, you're the executive director of Vashon Center for the Arts. And it's interesting, the evening tonight is going to be finished off with Beethoven's First Symphony, but not with a full orchestra. We can't have people in a room like that right next to each other. Just the string section alone would be a COVID environment. So it's the transcription that Franz Liszt made, and your pianist, who is Slava GRYAZNOV, is going to be performing this Beethoven First Symphony. Can you tell us about Slava and why you chose him to represent Vashon Center for the Arts for this festival called This is Beethoven?
Yeah, so I've been here as the executive director for the past year, came in right before the pandemic started, and got the pleasure of seeing Slava perform the first time, and then we brought him back last year. So he's been with us now for 2 years. He's come out annually as part of our classical music series. You know, his music is just a gift to us with his playing, and the audiences on the island absolutely adore him. I mean, he's packed the houses both times, and we've got this wonderfully intimate 300-seat theater. The quality of the sound really draws the audiences in, and with his adaptability at pulling at music as a performer, he's mesmerizing to watch. I think his transcriptionist background and his ability to well, just knowing Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's symphony is considered and regarded as one of the most difficult. We couldn't imagine anybody else tackling this, honestly. And it's just an absolute delight to have him. We had hoped to have him here in December, and he was on the books to perform here for us. And so the timing with how everything unfolded, and This is Beethoven, and working with Emerald City Music to bring this about, we're just really glad that it could work out, that we could do this together.
And the sound, you mentioned the sound. I noticed that at Vashon Center for the Arts. It has the perfect blend of intimacy, where you can hear every detail, but also just enough acoustic to work for Beethoven, for example.
Yeah, in fact, I think it was Slava who made a comment when he was first here about comparing it to, you know, the Carnegie Hall experience. And so on Vashon, we've actually did kind of the Carnegie Hall of Vashon. So it sounds like it when he's playing in here. So,
well, let's hear from the pianist himself, Vyacheslav Slava GRYAZNOV. You are the artist who will be playing this Beethoven, and Allison mentioned that you're a transcriber yourself. So I have a few questions. One is, you know, playing a whole symphony on only one piano is challenging enough. How do you sound like a bassoon? How do you pull the strings separately from the oboes, etc.? My two questions for you are, did you mess with Franz Liszt's transcription to make it work better for you? And what it's like to play a symphony on a piano?
Oh, that's actually a perfect question. Thank you, Alison, for your warm words about me, really. Yeah, basically, you know, we pianists, I used to say that Beethoven's piano sonatas are actually symphonies for piano. And through my career, I played quite a few his sonatas and a few transcriptions of symphonic music by Liszt, by Rachmaninoff, by Ravel, who, for example, just had almost all his pieces in two shapes, forms, as orchestral music and as a piano piece. So we have a direct comparison between two genres. Plus, yes, I have been writing arrangements myself as long as I remember myself. So, yeah, I felt very much at home while I was learning the First Symphony by Beethoven in Liszt piano version. And I have to say that it was really exciting for me to discover the work, which was the first. It's always interesting to see the whole way how composer starts and how he ends. And I found it really fascinating for myself. This music is full of joy, full of energy and humor. And I allowed myself a little guilty pleasure, and in a great traditions, I just improvised a little cadenza. So yeah, it will be a little bit out of symphonic traditions, but will be very much in traditions of that time, at traditions of performing on stage and so on.
Yeah, Beethoven was often composing in real time cadenzas at the years of his own piano concerto, right? So very tradition. So I'm curious, you know, this first concerto, this first symphony is, you can definitely hear the influence of the teacher he had for much less time than he would have hoped, which was Haydn. and
Yep.
obviously homage to Mozart. But it's so funny how even in this first symphony, you already hear Beethoven asserting those little surprises that send you off your.
That's very true. Let's, for example, talk about the third movement, which called menuetto, traditionally called menuetto, but given the tempo, it's just completely other thing. It's allegro vivace con brio, so it's totally different. Yeah.
Yeah, he's always yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Slava, I
Exactly.
know we're all looking forward very much to hearing a whole symphony on
Thank
88
you.
keys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd love to welcome the Director of Artistic Administration at Seattle Opera, who is Aaron Der Hakopian. Aaron, you have now started 2 youth artist programs, both with LA Opera and Seattle Opera, and now you're the artistic administrator. You're a singer yourself. You're a baritone, if I understand correctly. And so
You have a lot of information. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So you're well placed to understand what it is about the songs on the song recital that's going to kick off This is Beethoven. What is it about the way Beethoven writes songs compared to the composers from his own time? And of course, I'm thinking about the famous disregard Beethoven has for the comfort level of his singers. First of all, is that a myth? And what makes Beethoven different in his songwriting?
I in no way, shape, or form am I an expert in answering that question really correctly. But luckily, we have Sarah Larson here as well, who is going to sing for you shortly and also be able to help me answer that question. I will tell you that in the realm of vocal music, Beethoven is not, up front and center. So it is interesting to have seen how Sarah put those songs together in an order and how he negotiates between voice and piano. And you definitely notice a difference in the comparison to the Schumanns and the Schuberts and everything that people are used to. And the way the text is referred to is also noticeably different if you know a little bit about art songs. But if I may get Sarah's help on that as she prepared this beautiful program for that, maybe she can add in helping answering that question, if that's okay with you, Sean.
Sure, Sarah Larson, who is the mezzo being presented by Seattle Opera for This is Beethoven. Your take on whether Beethoven is tough on singers and what makes his songs different?
It's pretty tough. It's pretty daunting. The piece that we'll be starting the program with, Adelaida, I think is probably his most forgiving. And it's really an homage to Mozart. So you can really see like him really learning how to construct a line that is very kind to the singers. But especially in the other 2 German numbers specifically that we're doing, I programmed them to record them at the end of the session because I knew they were going to be so taxing in terms of tessitura and also all of the text that was going to be involved, that I was just going to need to reserve everything for that, and that there would just be nothing left after those songs.
So people who aren't actual soloists, as you are, may have joined a choir to sing Beethoven, and the experience that they encounter either in the Missa Solemnis or the Ninth Symphony is that you're going to struggle. You're going to be pushing up to your highest notes. Even the basses sing way up in Fs and things like that. And it's almost as if Beethoven is just saying, your discomfort is not my problem, right?
Yeah, and also as a mezzo too, I never have to sing super high or super low in Beethoven, but he really takes my middle voice and wants me to sing as loud as possible all of the time, and that can be a little hard after a while.
And
definitely can.
Aaron, one of the reasons I threw this question at you is that as an opera expert, Beethoven only wrote one, Fidelio.
Yes.
And Fidelio is loaded with difficult, arias.
Yeah. Fidelio, definitely you need well-managed, well-technicianed voices who are very comfortable and will not be nervous getting on stage before they need to get on stage. It's almost like how some very settled Wagnerians are and Verdians are, where either you are able to do it or you're not. So there is no, I'm going to mince my way through this. So yeah, there's definitely...
But also in terms of endurance, right?
it definitely endurance, because it teeter-tatters between the Helden and bel canto and all of those voice types and singing, and so everyone has to manage it on their own. And yeah, I will tell you that when offering which is the Fidelio, which King FM will present, I think, on Saturday.
Yeah.
You know, when you offer those roles, they don't quickly go like, yes. They go, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And then 2 days passes, and then you're like, okay, I think he's on or he's not on. So
yeah. Did I eat well the past 3 months? If so, I could take on this Beethoven.
Yeah, and when singers come, they're like, some of them are very comfortable with going out and doing things while rehearsing. But during Fidelio time, most of them, I remember, were like, we are monks. We shall stay home. We shall keep the la voce healthy. So, so yes, he's not forgiving in many ways, but he's able to also produce gorgeous music and challenging music in many ways, not just with what you hear, but intellectually speaking, regarding text and melody combined.
And spiritually as well, in the case of Fidelio, you know,
Well, yeah.
it's almost a kind of mass. It's almost a kind of mass for humanity, on top of being a great rescue story where the woman is the heroine, not the damsel in distress, right?
Yeah, and of course, let us also remember his hearing issue. So I mean, it's just a very amazing thing to think about. And in Sarah's pieces, some of them are isolating pieces, and it's very interesting to know that's the composer that must have felt isolated from the world, right? Who has written or is writing, depending on when that all happened. It's a very interesting study. So follow the text when you guys watch.
Yeah, that's important, Sarah. I mean,
yeah.
First of all, how did you pick your songs?
Well, of course, we had to center on some really classic Beethoven song lit, but I was also interested in his few Italian songs. They're really bizarre. Some of them, you know, he wrote in 5 minutes, and like others, you know, that he really labored over them. I really wanted to pick those songs first and then build out from there. And I used my own personal agenda to showcase some female composers that were definitely influenced by Beethoven's work.
And not just female composers, but at the end, you've got the Fab Four.
We do have a Beatles song at the end, which seems a little sacrilegious, but
Sure
I really wanted to add some levity to the program, and I slogged through a bunch of really bad French pop with Beethoven tunes. I listened to some Billy Joel songs, but this specific song from Abbey Road is really special. Basically, John Lennon and Yoko Ono were hanging out one day, and Yoko was playing Moonlight Sonata, or as he said, some classical bits. And he was like, what would that sound like backwards? And so she played some of the arpeggios backwards, and then he quickly took over and started messing with the order of the arpeggios and how they were moving around, and came up with this little song. And it follows the same modulations, and we've made an arrangement basically of the two, which again is a little sacrilegious, but I think what we've come up with is very brooding and a really interesting, special piece. And I'm so excited for people to hear it.
You know, I think you don't do yourself justice when you say sacrilegious, because I feel confident saying that if Beethoven heard about what you were doing, he'd say that's exactly the kind of thing I would do.
He'd be okay with it.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to Byron Schenkman for a second here to talk about the personal aspects of Beethoven's struggles and how they informed his music. I mean, not only this is a kid who was physically abused when he was younger, but ended up having to take care of family members. He wrote this beautiful testament about struggling with the idea of committing suicide when he found out that he wasn't going to be able to hear the very thing he lived for, which was music. And it sat in his drawer, this famous Heiligenstadt Testament, right? All these challenges that he faced, the deafness probably being the biggest one. It's an easy question to say, well, that clearly influenced his music, right? But as you look at the total output, do you think those other things, those other challenges he faced, really is something that can be thematic today. It's a bit of a rhetorical question, Byron.
Yeah, thanks. You know, what really strikes me the most about that is, for me, I feel it as proof of the divine, proof that there's something bigger than all of us. Because when Beethoven was at that darkest period in his life, he was writing some of the most transcendently beautiful music, you know, pieces like the Fourth Piano Concerto and the Spring Sonata and the Third Cello Sonata, you know, all this just completely, it's not just joyful music, it's really transcendent music. And he was experiencing all that pain and suffering. And it wasn't a time when, you know, there weren't therapy groups and 12-step programs, and there wasn't understanding of disability, and yet he was able to connect to something really beautiful and really pure.
An act of will.
Or an act of letting go of will.
Aha. Beautiful. Well, I have a question for all of you then around the theme of tonight, which is legacy, you know, what Beethoven has done for us today. We're celebrating the impact of this amazing composer 250 years ago. It's astonishing to think about that. He stood for something. He stood for a lot, and struggled against what we've been talking about here. Is there anything, when you look forward to the arts here in the Puget Sound region, is there anything you'd like to see applied from Beethoven's life to the arts in general in Seattle? Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Byron. You go ahead.
I'll jump back in. You know, speaking of transcendence, I think we're at a crossroads now, and I think it's time that we transcend the canon that we all grew up with and move beyond Beethoven and classical music as this sort of elitist club for rich white boys and their friends. And, you know, we get to redefine what the canon is, and we get to, you know, we don't need to make yet another recording of a Beethoven sonata or even a Beethoven song. We can look at other repertoire that might need 10 or 20 good recordings before we get back to Beethoven again.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in before the next person answers that, you know, King FM has been really featuring a lot of composers who have not previously gotten attention, and it's a terrible thing to realize how good this music is, and then it hasn't been left out because it was mediocre. It's been left out because that canon of people that Byron referred to, you know, has just gotten precedence by virtue of habit. And so, you know, we have been enjoying the discoveries of composers who are non-white dead males for the last year that are astounding, that bring in a lot of feedback from people saying, why haven't we heard this? So, well, we're trying to catch up. I think, Aaron, you're about to jump in with something.
Oh, to me, putting all the actual geniusness aside, I think there was some words come into my grit and guts. I think it is, as creators and as producers of products which creative people put together, I think we shouldn't shy away from having the grits and guts to go the extra step further and just to see where all of our art forms in whichever genre can change and develop itself and make its new mark in the coming next 100, 200 years. So I would like to take that example, just that to know almost anybody in the world who's had any relationship with culture or art knows the name Beethoven. And so something he did well was noticed, and I think we can all do that respectively in all of our products as well, to make that mark and take it to the next level. Not to say we should forget anybody in the past at all, but we should learn and build on, and that's why I also love what Sarah did with her program to others that may have been influenced by this great genius individual.
I mean, I'll say a bit of the obvious, which is that the main thing that Beethoven did was inspire change. I mean, music was never the same after him, right? Brahms couldn't even write a symphony because the Ninth Symphony existed. He didn't even know where to start. What do you do after the Ninth Symphony, right? So everybody had to rethink their relationship to music after Beethoven. And, if it seems to me, if there's anything that we can do for the arts in Seattle, it's take that cue from Beethoven to inspire change. And it sounds like you're all ready to do that. Sarah, were you about to jump in? Did I cut you off?
No, I was just going off what Aaron said. I think that spirit of innovation, which I think Beethoven really barreled through his life with, is what all of these organizations involved with this festival are currently doing. And I think we need to hold on to that spirit, even as we may move into more normal looking times. The innovation that's happened in this time, I think, is really priceless.
Think about the words like resilience and the fact that, Beethoven's disability himself, against all odds, his music endures, right? Art endures. And we're 250 years ago, right? I mean, the journey through time that his music has made. And what it just tells me over and over again is that art survives. We are here to reignite and inspire each other. And I can't wait for us to get back to it. At the same time, it's been an absolute thrill to see how people have pivoted, merged, collaborated, and partnered together. It has been an inspiration.
And you're all hinting at another sort of thematic word, which is healing. If you listen to the cavatina from his string quartet, your bones heal themselves, your tissues and your nerves repair themselves. So this is not just the composer of the big declamation. He's also the composer of stopping time, slowing it down, allowing you time to recover. And I think what I'm hearing from all of you is also this notion that there is a lot of healing to happen in the next couple of years, not only just because of COVID, but because of the social movements this last year. So we've got our plate full, huh?
Most definitely.
Definitely, yes. I think this composer showed us what's possible. So everything basically is possible. And I think we should just take this spirit and move forward whenever, what will happen. And I think the music was the thing actually which helped Beethoven to survive. In this art form, he was able to express everything he was thinking about, he was struggling with it. So that's a very nice tool for all of us, basically, to be humans, to be better, and to learn life, and just to make the world better.
And Slava, we're going to hear you in another hour as we kick off the festival. Everyone tune in at thisisbeethoven.org. The streams, by the way, are available for access until January 4th if you want to make a donation. But I'll be back tomorrow at 6:30 again with this time Seattle Pro Musica, Washington's Ensemble Theater, South Hudson Project. And tomorrow we look at the isolation experienced by Beethoven in his life. Thank you for joining us all tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, take care. Bye now.